Good morning, friends. This is Altazar of altazarastrology.com, welcoming you to this first of a series of presentations I'm offering on astrology as a tool for spiritual growth and healing. And I offer this because so many people, even who are hip to astrology and have had their astrology chart made, view astrology mainly as a tool for looking at prediction possibilities, or what's known as a horoscope. And astrology has been largely marginalized in the media as a form of entertainment, along the lines of offering these sense of what might happen today in your life or what's coming up in the near future, or the character qualities of astrology, such as Virgos being detail-oriented, or Capricorns being practical and organized, or Libras being social and tactful and relationship-oriented. So these are certainly some valid sides of astrology, but astrology was originally evolved over thousands of years through the ancient Vedas that eventually came through the Hindu practices. Also, this Vedic point of view in astrology I have studied in terms of its meaning regarding your soul growth. Also, I've studied the Buddhist perspective on karma and reincarnation, the Chinese astrology, which offers much deeper insights into summarizing a person's character, personality, and theme of the expression of their life purpose. And as well, Western metaphysics that have been ignored or not revealed too readily in especially this society. And Western metaphysics also highlight these aspects of soul growth and psychology and personal growth. So I've studied all of these perspectives over the past 25 years and with hundreds of clients, and basically view astrology in its heart as a tool for spiritual personal growth, soul growth, and on a deeper level understanding what we're here to heal. And so I'm going to proceed with a basic summary of the spiritual point of view here. But I'm going to talk a little bit about why I even got into astrology. And that's because in the early 80s, I really didn't have a clue as to who I really was or why I'm here. You know, what's the purpose of my life? Is it to eat, drink, dance, and be merry? Or, well, that could be a part of it, but also what would bring me fulfillment in life? What would be my passion in life? And how could I find really what most of us are looking for, peace of mind? So when I originally went to astrologers, professionals, and they told me things about myself that no one would know, such as difficulty or tensions I had with my father, and even at that time continued resentment I had towards my father, and based on the things that I felt my father had hurt me or my family during my childhood. How could they know that? They just looked at an astrology chart and told me that these are issues that I would have with my father. And so that profoundly touched me, since everything they told me about this tension and dynamic I might have with my father, and especially authority figures in my adult life, they could have told me the minute I was born. They would have had the birth date, time, and location to construct my astrology chart, and then interpreted just as they were the day I went to see them. So this is what profoundly touched me in terms of seeing how astrology could be a much more profound tool for insight regarding my soul growth and a path for understanding healing and transformation. So I'm going to summarize briefly. Many of you have viewed some of my videos and just summarize the spiritual basis for the kind of interpretation that I offer and a spiritual astrologer offers as far as the basis for understanding a person's astrology chart. So I'm going to just put up an astrology chart here so you can see what one looks like for those of you who've just never seen an astrology chart. And this is the chart of Richard Burton, the famous actor who I'm choosing as a chart for demonstration purposes. Hope that holds and stays. So this is an astrology chart. So from this point of view, an astrology chart is meant to be one's spiritual report card in the school of life. And what that means is that from this point of view, life is a journey of spiritual growth in which we're here to evolve our soul and our consciousness towards higher and higher levels of awareness of the meaning of spiritual principles that, when inculcated in our attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors, yield greater and greater levels of harmony, happiness, peace of mind, prosperity, and loving relationships in our lives. And it's said that we live many lifetimes in order to evolve our souls towards greater attunement with these spiritual principles. This is known as reincarnation. Now, you don't have to accept or believe this possibility to hear the information I'm offering, because even if one doesn't accept it, when an astrology chart is interpreted, it should accurately describe what you're experiencing now in your life or have experienced. So, that's the real essence of proof. However, from this point of view, during our many lifetimes, we generate what's known as karma, and karma means cause and effect. Or, to the extent to which we are not, well, let's start with we are. The extent to which we are in attunement with these spiritual laws and principles in our attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors is the extent to which we come into this life with positive gifts, talents, natural abilities, positive attraction to socioeconomic, education, and relationship, as well as health resources, as we have been in attunement with the laws of love in regards to all these areas of life: our diet, our health, our relationships, our approach to career, our approach to home and family, our emotional awareness and attunement, etc. So there's a myriad of subtleties connected to being and having self-worth, self-esteem, and faith in the love and providence of the universe. On the other hand, to the extent to which, out of ignorance, self-will, or our ego, or fear, we have not been in attunement with these spiritual laws and principles, we have generated negative karma in our past lifetimes, so that in this lifetime we would come into experiencing blocks, frustrations, or difficulties in whatever area of life we have not really gotten it or evolved our soul. And that's why a person's astrology chart is a unique roadmap, if you will, configuration of each person's soul growth healing path. That's not necessarily going to be the same for another person. And that's why in this new age, the new paradigm for healing is to understand your unique issues, get out of denial about them, and work on the antidote to healing those issues. So today, I'm going to talk about the father wound, which is quite a common healing issue for many people in this society. And well, in many societies, and in this millennium that has been patriarchally contaminated, if you will. So I don't know if that's a word, I hope so, but at any rate, I'll just point out that in American culture, the father wound is almost inherent in the socioeconomic cultural structure of the United States or Western society. And that's largely due, not for all, but for a great many. That's due to the fact that we have a society that's so structured, divorced from nature. And we have these concrete squares of society that squares in themselves cause a kind of tension in a person's being to be productive. And so fathers work 40 plus hours. The society's culture encourages work and productivity. And the society also encourages excessive amount of work in one's intellectual mind, so that people are just so in their heads, thinking and working and busy and with their to-do lists. And so fathers have been so structured in their work and their activity and their busyness and their cerebralness to be more and more divorced from their hearts. I'm not saying all, but there's a predominance of, the excess of work, the amount of stress that goes into commuting to work. How many people have to have an 11-hour day or so just to commute, do their work, have their lunch hour, do their chores? How many people, and fathers, let alone mothers, we'll talk about the mother wound some other time, but come home wasted, just emotionally unavailable, stressed out, and not even aware that how stressed they are. The stress is kind of the norm. The 5-hour energy, the 10 cups of coffee, the liter or two of Pepsi or Coca-Cola to keep going during the day. So is it any wonder that you experience in your childhood, as I did, a father who comes home who's distant, who's maybe stressed, maybe irritable and cranky, maybe even abusive, as a reflection of the internalized anger that he has in regards to just not having a peaceful existence. So these are all elements that go into the potential father wound. Fathers becoming addicts and alcoholics, going to the bar after work or needing a few drinks to unwind when they come home. Fathers who are narcissistic, who are just self-absorbed, so unnurtured from the stress of work and the dynamic of their schedules, that they need attention when they come home. So they're more interested in telling you about themselves and being self-absorbed than hearing anything about your day. How did you do today, Sherry or Bobby or Mary? No, they'll tell you all about their work day. This is the narcissistic father, the self-absorbed father who is so needy of attention that maybe he didn't even get from his father. And the workaholic, and so I've talked about these emotionally unavailable or abusive potentials of that start to impact one as a child and become some of the basis for the father wound. Now, what's interesting is that we can see the father wound in a person's astrology chart. So the question is, and welcome, Kimberly, glad to have you here today. The question is, why have I or Richard Burton or others attracted this kind of father? Why do we have a father wound? Are we a victim? And actually the point of understanding a person's astrology chart and getting to a place where you can start to embrace the notion of forgiveness. And forgiveness is not just a moral command from the Bible or other spiritual authorities. Forgiveness is actually about owning what one is here to heal in their consciousness, and realizing that it's not a coincidence who you are and what has happened to you in your childhood. And the longer one holds on to the victim mentality or the sense of resentment for who they are and where they are in the socioeconomic ladder, or, one person had a good father, another had a lousy father. One's father was an alcoholic, the other's father was, abandoned the family, left the family, or was a workaholic. Blame, 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 blame. Where there is profound healing impact is when a person can see in their own astrology chart that can be described the minute you were born, that you might have this kind of father due to a certain kind of karma that you have had in prior lifetimes where you have been out of attunement with the spiritual laws of love, healing, and well-being. That starts to make the notion of, or the moral construct of forgiveness, not just something one should do, or they'll go to hell or whatever, but it's something that one would want to do in order to find peace, healing, joy, and soul growth. So this is the point here. Now, what is the? Here's the other point that I find somewhat humorous. Pardon me for a moment. Why is it in this creation that a dog is a dog? I point to my nose here. Dogs, have a keen sense of smell. But generally, a dog knows it's a dog. It barks. It's a guard. It's the sentinel of society. A mouse knows it's a mouse. It functions in the world. It gathers. It connects with other mice. It goes after food scraps and things. A lion knows it's a lion. It acts like a lion. It does lion things. It hunts. It has a pride. It goes collectively with its pride. And a mosquito is a mosquito. It bites. It tries to do its parasitic thing. Why is it that human beings, so many, not all, depending. And I take this example because it has to do with the father wound. Why do so many human beings not know who they are, or why they're here, or what they're here to do? I know when I was a teenager, I had the thought that I could be a football player. And do I look like I have the body of a football player? I actually weighed 10 pounds less than I weigh now back then. Why would I think I could be a football player? That my ego would want me to be a football player because I could look tough, maybe I could attract more girls, whatever. Why do I have so many clients over the years who have pursued jobs like accountant. And some people are here to be accountants. I love accountants, and they do great things. But a lot of people became bookkeepers or accountants because they looked in the newspaper and there's sort of a hell of a lot of jobs as a bookkeeper, and so they became an accountant or a bookkeeper. And maybe they could do it, but yeah, they didn't like it. They weren't that great at it, but they could do it. Or, some people go into sales. They're here to make lots of money selling cars or furniture or real estate. Everyone go into real estate in Boulder. You make millions of dollars. But not everyone's here to be a salesperson or a real estate person. And the real question is, why don't we know or get who we are? And so finding one's life purpose is directly connected to being in touch with one's heart and trusting in the providence and love of the universe to guide one to do what one loves to do, what one has natural gifts, talents, and abilities to do. Now, where does the father wound come in on this? Welcome, David. Glad you could join us. Well, the father wound comes in on this because if we had fathers who were miserable, who were in it for the money, they had just jobs, or careers that had status and prestige, but they didn't really like what they were doing per se. They were in it for the prestige, the ego, the money. Or they just had jobs that burned them out. Maybe they kind of liked their jobs, but so that gives us as a child an example of someone who lives a life of sacrifice and nose to the grindstone. So the consequences of having an unavailable father, or a father who doesn't encourage your positive identity development, creates what we call an adapted child. And a child, those of us who kind of, through our heads, try to figure out who we are or how we're going to fit into the world, without having a true connection to a higher power or the love of the universe. So here's some impacts on a person who may have had a father wound based in abandonment, neglect, the narcissistic, self-absorbed father, or the abusive father, authoritarian, verbally, physically, or sexually abusive father. The impact is low self-esteem, poor judgment, living in and harboring resentment all the time, lack of goals or being a procrastinator, just fundamentally just being distrustful, especially distrustful of authority, and ultimately not trusting in the love and providence of a greater, higher power that might guide one towards a fulfilling life. People with a father wound tend to be controlling, generally fearful or constantly filled with anxiety, a loner, socially challenged. I'm looking for the right word here. I want to be politically correct. Having an unfulfilling life, just in terms of survival or work that provides for income, but otherwise not having much passion for the life. So a proclivity towards escapism and addictions, or simply being irresponsible because of an inner critic or a sense of perfectionism, and or the other side is to prove to your father, since the father didn't really help you or ignored you or wasn't available, prove you're a father, you are somebody, so you are excessively ambitious. You're going to outdo your father. You're going to show the world that you're not going to be the failure or the lack of fulfilling success your father was. So you're going to be a workaholic. You're going to be driven. You're going to be that corporate executive. You're going to be the millionaire, entertainer, or whoever. But it's driven by anger, and it's driven by resentment, and it's not really fulfilling. Why are so many successful entertainers or even executives committing suicide? combative, judgmental, self-absorbed egotism. So these are some of the impacts of the father wound. So on the other hand, not everyone, there are various shades of gray of the father wounds. I'm not saying everyone has it or everyone does. Some people have it, some don't. Many people have it in varying degrees. Okay, many fathers were good in certain respects and neglectful or abusive in other respects. But there's no blame here. I'm even, as mentioned before, pointing out that some of this is just inherent in the socioeconomic, political, cultural structure of Western society to create the father wound. But characteristics of a good father are important to note and compare here. And after this, I'm going to get into giving examples astrologically in a person's astrology chart of how a father wound is actually indicated in an astrology chart. But starting out with, what's a good father? I know people who have had pretty good fathers who themselves live very fulfilled and integrated lives. I would say that karmically and based on the spiritual principles that I've studied through the Hindu, Buddhist, Christian perspectives and Chinese astrology, that a good father is There we go. Sorry, the internet connection got a little shady there. I wonder what the universe is trying to tell me on that. We're trying to talk about the good father here. So the good father's characteristics fundamentally are that he has a spiritual life, that he has some faith. Doesn't matter, a religion per se or no religion at all, a faith in just the goodness and providence of nature and the beauty is in life. So this is not a discussion about trying to promote any particular spiritual path, but it does imply that father has a balanced life in which he allows space for inner introspective contemplation and the experience of peace of mind. However he may have found that through meditation, through walks in the woods, through being a physical laborer who, there are many enlightened construction workers, the carpenters. Jesus supposedly was a carpenter. But a father who not only spiritually centered, but knew how to take the time to spend quality time with his family, not only with his wife, but with his children, who took the time to be beyond himself, to understand and inquire and be a good listener in regards to his children. But even more so, he was a father who had some kind of moral compass that would include living a healthy lifestyle and try to gear or orient his life towards integrity, honesty, magnanimity, values of generosity, charity, and as well have a healthy lifestyle. I think I've shared that. So his example of being a good role model and having faith in values and integrity and morality, and as well space for inner contemplation and inner peace. So those are that's somewhat of a benchmark for the good father. So I'm going to just now briefly just show you this chart of Richard Burton here. For those not familiar with an astrology chart, it consists of the 10 planetary bodies plus some other symbols. And the planets tell us what quality in the person that we're looking at, such as Mercury tells us how this person may communicate or use their intellectual mind. The sign tells us how that person may manifest the energy. The house, these sections tell us where in life that energy may be expressed. And then these angles here, what we call aspects. That's a 120-degree angle, that's a 90-degree angle. Those tell us the deepest potential of a person's karma, or where they may have or will be in this lifetime out of sync with positive spiritual laws and principles to manifest a healthier and happier life. So, what I'm dwelling on today is the sun sign. So, Richard Burton's sun sign is in Scorpio. So, your sun sign and its sign placement, its degree placement, its house placement, and the angles to the sun sign, the aspects, to the sun sign, all indicate the potential of the experience that you may have had with your father. It describes not only, there's positive sides to these angles, Richard Burton has, and he also has some negative sides. So once again, it's not black and white. Astrology is very sophisticated in showing subtleties of how your father may have been a positive role model, a positive influence, and how at certain times during your childhood or predominant through your childhood, he may have been negative or difficult. So, and again, that is a reflection of your karma. You chose that father to recreate certain issues, that you're here to draw on the positive karma of your gifts and talents and understand the negative side of your karma to heal and evolve. So in this example, Richard Burton has a Sun-Saturn conjunction. That implies that his father was somehow restricted in his life, that his father had to work a lot, that his father may have had a job that was difficult or taxing and stressful, that his father may have had a side to him that was conservative, conventional, and wanted to fit into the expectations of the common society. However, this also shows that this trine to Uranus indicates that his father was of progressive consciousness, that his father didn't have hard prejudices, that his father was a man open to people from different walks of life, races, ethnic backgrounds. His father also was open to new ideas about life, culture, and activity. However, on the other hand, the square of Neptune to his Sun-Saturn conjunction, and Saturn is a planet, by the way, that does represent a side of the influence one's father has had on you. Neptune in a square, Neptune represents, and I'm going to talk about each of the planets as they are an impact in one's chart. Neptune represents loss, sadness, emotional dysfunctionality, a sense of purposelessness or lack of direction in one's life. It can imply someone who has a disability or an illness or an infirmity. In worst case scenario, it can imply escapism, like alcoholism. So what this implies that Richard Burton's father may have been an alcoholic, and or implies his father may have had a disability of some kind, or was distant and kind of lost with his life. So interestingly enough, Richard Burton's father was a coal miner. And interestingly enough, Saturn in Scorpio is associated with the underlying minerals of geology. and Saturn is associated with coal. Interesting. And Neptune, in a square to Saturn, implies that this is a man who worked really hard, Saturn's son, but was oppressed in his life and kind of lost and exhausted. His father was an alcoholic. And so, can you imagine calling me, or any spiritual astrologer, giving me your birth date, time, and location, and then having me describe your father? Your father, I probably wouldn't have guessed he was a coal miner, but I would have said his father was a hard-working man, somewhat liberal and open in his ideology and progressive, and that his father may have been rather sad or distant or possibly an alcoholic or lived an escapist, dysfunctional experience because of the oppressiveness and difficulty of his working life. Wow. This is how I was impacted by astrologers when I first had professionals do my chart, because I was a complete skeptic. So now we're going to move on here and talk more thoroughly about the father wound in astrology. And see it astrologically even further. So the first thing I'm going to get into is talking about the signs, just simply the signs that indicate that you had a dominant father, that the father was the dominant parent in your child, or the dominant impacting parent. Not saying he was a good or bad parent, as I share, that the people are a mix of things, but if you are a fire sign, Aries, Leo, or Sagittarius, this is very likely that your father was the dominant parent in your childhood, and he may have had the more active role parenting you. And sometimes it implies just simply that you males were the predominant energy in your childhood. It could be brothers as well, or the father had a dominant impact, even if maybe he wasn't around much. Okay, and that, to a lesser extent, applies to you if you're a Gemini, Libra, or Aquarius. So next, we're looking at, well, let me just point out, if you're a fire sign or an air sign, it tends to imply that you tend to have more of a masculine energy. You tend to be more proactive, authoritative. Even if you're a woman, doesn't matter. You can be a man that's predominantly a feminine energy, or you can be a woman who's predominant masculine energy. So it implies you have that more proactive, authoritative, even sometimes controlling, but dynamic, enthusiastic kind of approach to life. Now, the father wound signs, that's not to say that people who have fire or air signs don't have the father wound. Very well may, and we'll talk about that as we go into the angles that might exist to your sun sign in your chart, the aspects. But the signs that are more readily associated with, or more likely to have a father wound, are Capricorn, Scorpio, Pisces, and Virgo. So why is that? Well, these are the earth and water signs. So the earth and water signs are more mother-dominated, or mother more likely had been the impacting parent or the predominant functional parent in one's childhood. And the characterization of the father wound for Capricorns is that, well, let's start out with all of these signs. It can imply an abandonment issue. So in other words, father just wasn't around much, or wasn't around at all. So that can exist for these 4 signs. It can imply abandonment with father physically being around, but simply being a workaholic and just come home burned out or not around or not functional and active in his parenting role. It can also imply father may have been critical or demanding or materialistic, not a constructive father. So in other words, he may have worked a lot or even not worked a lot, but didn't have fathering skills. So he just may have been authoritarian, controlling. He may have been used corporal punishment and physically abusive. He might have even been sexually abusive. Or he may have been an addict of some kind, an escapist, just not coping with life, not a good role model. And or the other possibility, he may have been a very wounded person himself, and as a result, very egotistic or narcissistic, self-absorbed, and just not available as a constructive guide and a parenting influence. So if you are a Capricorn, just basically it can imply, not all Capricorns, many Capricorns have, a positive father experience, but Capricorn is the sign of the father. So it often implies that when you're a Capricorn, you're here to evolve a sensibility of finding your own sense of authority and life direction. It implies that if your father was the father wound type, that he didn't encourage your identity development. He didn't offer a sense of positive role modeling for expressing career or profession. So many Capricorns are here, as bootstrappers. They're the ambitious type who are, here to work hard and find their own mission in life, and often do so. And yet, they need to heal the fact that because they couldn't change their father, or their father just let them down and was a source of disappointment, that also then fuels into a resentment that rejects higher consciousness, rejects having faith in a higher power. And so you find the Capricorns like Richard Nixon, who reached the pinnacle of achievement, yet are not morally guided or don't understand karma in terms of what you put out, you get back. And so corruption is one of the main faults of Capricorns who don't eventually also embrace the spiritual path. The higher Capricorn is the one who is willing to carve their own destiny and be a responsible leader or manager, who also includes the moral and spiritual principles to be not a self-aggrandizing leader, but someone who is there to serve and be responsible for the better welfare of the greater good of society. So now, on the other hand, we're going to look at Scorpio. So Scorpios can experience a deep father wound, not as much like Capricorns per se in terms of the controlling father, or the father who's just not available, not a good role model. But here they may experience an actual abusive kind of father who is manipulative, controlling, demanding, and not taking into consideration the child's deeper aspirations or inner needs. The father may also be an angry type of person who as well has experienced abuse in his childhood or neglect. And so he could be the raging alcoholic or escapist in some capacity. So the person with a Scorpio also the father in this context may be someone who speaks readily of his resentments towards others, who may actually talk about or demonstrate vindictiveness, how he retaliates or gets back at others for what he considers offenses or hurts or rejections. So a person with a Scorpio sun who has a father wound is here to actually embrace and understand and meaning on the deepest sense of forgiveness, transcending resentments, owning one's karma, and becoming someone who embraces, psychological, emotional, and spiritual awareness to the extent to which they are able to find inner peace through meditation practices and as well forgiveness practices, and be someone who's an example of having penetrating, powerful perception and insight into people, but not to use it manipulatively for their own gain, but to use it as a means for transforming and healing others. So the higher symbol of Scorpio is the phoenix who rises out of the ashes of negativity, and or the eagle. Well, then we have Pisces and Virgo. So Pisces may experience, and those of you who have possibility, what I'm talking about here is also those who, like Capricorn, might have Saturn aspecting their sun sign in an adverse aspect, or those who are like Scorpios may have Pluto adversely aspecting their sun sign. So for Pisces, or those who might have Neptune adversely as aspecting their sun sign, this is the father who, as I shared with Richard Burton's chart, the father who's dejected, who's unfulfilled in his life, who may actually have a physical, mental, or emotional disability that makes him not really functional as a father, but it may evoke the child's sympathy to caretake him more than he's able to caretake the child. The Neptune aspect, or Pisces, may have fathers who are outright alcoholics or escapists, and or just have left the family or not available as a constructive parental role model. Again, with all of these circumstances, this is only if one has the adverse aspects to their sun sign in these signs that indicate the father wound. And Virgos may experience low self-worth due to fathers who are overly judgmental or critical, constantly riding them to become something or do this or that, or not trusting them in terms of practical activities like just how to wash dishes, or take out a light bulb, or fix a broken piece of mechanical device. That is the father who may say, you don't know how to do that, or let me show you how to do that. Who is constantly critical, and so people who are Virgos are often very self-critical and compelled to be of service to others, but can be so in a codependent or sacrificing way, just like Pisces can be as well. So codependency, self-sacrifice, martyrdom, these are symptoms of the father wound for people who are Pisces and Virgos, or those who may have Neptune adverse aspect to their sun sign, or those who may have planets in Virgo, or adverse Mercury aspects, or Chiron adverse aspects to their sun sign. And all these kinds of aspects I'm telling about are the placements in your astrology chart. If you don't have a chart, or have never studied astrology, or have had this accurate interpretation, you can find this out by contacting me or a spiritual astrologer who can make your chart and describe these issues in your astrology chart. You can go to my website, www.altazarastrology.com, or contact me, altazarastrology@gmail.com. My website address is right here. And so lastly, I'm going to talk about father wound aspects located in a person's astrology chart. So I have talked about Richard Burton's chart, that fact that if a person has Neptune's opposite or in a squared aspect to their sun sign natally, the issues that brings up, as I've talked also about Pisces. So now I'm going to talk about those who have Mars. So if a person has Mars, the planet Mars, in a squared angle or an opposition angle to their sun sign in their astrology chart, the kind of, and if you don't know that, you might even just simply relate to what I talk about here. But it implies you may have a father who was angry a lot, who just had an angry temperament, who was demanding or abusive, may have used corporal punishment. He may have been just someone who was rather impulsive in doing things. He also may have been someone who just didn't set goals in his life and tended towards activities or professions that were harmful to him, debilitated him. Let's say if he was into construction and constantly getting injured, hammering his fingers or whatever, he just may not have been a skilled carpenter, but he did it anyway. So that's an implication of someone who has Mars, a father who was not a good role model and taking care of himself, may have done so in a negative way. So if you have Mars in a square aspect to your sun sign, it implies that you have a karma of not approaching life or trusting the universe to guide you towards a more healthy identity and creative self-expression. It implies that you could tend to be a very impatient person, and impatient especially with yourself, and or be someone who curses a lot. It can be someone who doesn't tend to set goals very much and just jumps into whatever work or circumstances might impulsively be available to give you a sense of security, because you may not trust the providence of the universe. It implies that you have a lot of physical drive and energy, and you're here to really learn how to take care of your health, and through better diet, and channel that physical drive and energy through sports, exercise, and physical recreation. In fact, you may even find that a profession that is fulfilling in regards to sports and physical recreation. There are many boxers or fighters or athletes or even entertainers who are like Bruce Lee or martial artists who have these kind of Mars aspects. Now we're moving on to Jupiter in a person's chart. So if you have Jupiter opposite or squaring your chart, it implies that your father may not have been around a lot. Simply, he may have been a rather positive person when he was around, but he may have been an adventurer who traveled a lot, or was a traveling salesman, or an intellectual, or someone who had a kind of ministry, a positive one, but he wasn't actually as much involved in parenting or guiding you. He may have been a great guide for other people. He may have been a therapist even. He could be Mr. Bon Vivant, super positive all the time, always positive, always positive. But even in the face of grief, sadness, oppression, difficulty, always, Mr. Positive. But there's a kind of dishonesty in that, and or trying to hide the truth from the children for fear that that's going to cause them a problem. But the children actually pick up on the fact that he's out of money, or he's going bankrupt, or he just lost his job. But he comes home and says, oh, everything's great. I'll get a job tomorrow. Don't worry. You know, and some of it can be good, but some of it can seem like a lie. It's the father who may have been quite boastful, an excessive risk taker, who is all in with his finances for some MLM business scheme and loses it all. Or he's the get rich quick father who's pursuing this scheme or that scheme, but he's not someone who's really willing to work hard and build the skills and resources to be successful. Yet he's easy at boasting about what little accomplishments he has. He may even boast about your accomplishments to make himself look good. So this is the Jupiter adverse sun sign father. The healing associated with this is learning to, again, all of these healings are related to embracing a spiritual path, meditating, evolving a faith and trust in the providence of the universe, and learning the skills necessary to manifest your identity in a constructive and positive way. So for the Jupiter Sun person, they need to learn planning. They need to trust others, to share their ideas and their visions for the future, to see if those visions are realistic, because the Jupiter Sun person can overextend themselves or have delusions of grandeur in terms of what they're trying to do with their life. The calling is to have greater empathy with others, and also have and practice gratitude on a continuous, regular basis for what they do have, and gradually build through goal setting. Not gold. Gold arrives, but goal setting is the foundation for it. Also, it's important to be someone who's on a spiritual path and walks their talk, because Jupiter Sun people are here to actually be kind of ministers themselves, but only in the context of the fact that they have walked their talk. They have accomplished through their spiritual practices and can be an honest example of that. Okay, next we're moving on to Saturn. So those of you who are still with me, thank you, and it's great that you're interested in the depth of this topic. Those of you who've tuned in later or are listening to this later, grab the portions or sections of this that really apply to you or you relate to, or go back and listen to the whole thing, because you'll find that this does highlight potentially different people as well as the possibilities of your own father wound. So the Saturn person, squaring your sun sign Saturn or opposite your sun sign. This is the father who is burdened, who was restricted in his life, who may not have been available due to workaholism, the father who may have had a preoccupation with socioeconomic status, and constantly emphasize that over honoring your heart and the deeper sensibility for contributing your gifts and talents. He's a father who may have told you, become a doctor, lawyer, or an accountant, even though you want to be a musician or a poet or a pet sitter, whatever. He is the father who could be quite judgmental as well, rather conservative in terms of having certain prejudices against people or people of other political parties or ethnic groups. And he could be someone who is just simply emotionally unavailable due to excessive amount of work, burnout, and or just not having father skills. So the healing regarding a Saturn aspect to your sun is, of course, finding your own spiritual path. Many Saturn people are bootstrappers in life. If you have Saturn aspect or an adverse Saturn in your chart, it often implies you're not going to inherit from your father a profession or a life direction. Or if you do, it may be one that you have to adjust or revise to be more in alignment with what's fulfilling for you. And so so the Saturn aspect does imply working hard, but also learning to lighten up on yourself and forgive your father, and open to the love and providence of the universe as it can guide you to gradually the levels of accomplishment, attainment, and success that you truly seek. And as well, as I've shared, to, like Capricorns, not live a life that's associated with a drive of ambition and resentment towards your father, to outdo your father, but to actually trust in the divine Mother, Father, God, who can guide you to sharing the gifts and talents that will make you responsible yet peaceful and balanced in your leadership or management. Next, we move on to Uranus. So we've got probably about 5 or 10 more minutes towards the end of this discussion. So the Uranus aspect to a person's sun sign and opposition or a square is the father who has been rather eccentric, rebellious type, counterculture, avant-garde, bohemian, politically probably left, liberal, or radical, or maybe even radical right, ultra-conservative. But whatever the case, this father is thrives on being strange, different, unusual, or bucking the tide of conventionality. And that can be all well and good, but that also makes it so that he may have been rather erratic, not around, here today, gone tomorrow, back again. So the characterization of being erratic or overly doctrinaire with some kind of cause, political movement, humanitarian activism, that acts as a predominant theme of his influence on you, or trying to indoctrinate you towards that point of view, as he would consider it a kind of parenting, but not necessarily being available to just simply care about you and listen to you, or emotionally encourage you, or be necessarily open to allowing you to decide what political or cultural or societal approach you might find more meaningful. It can imply that in your adult life you jump from one thing to another, that because your father seemed to thrive on needing freedom, that Uranus aspects, sun fathers often changed jobs a lot, moved a lot, were never satisfied, and as well also activists, because they wanted to change the world rather than change themselves first, because they blame the world for why they may not have been fulfilled. So this is an issue with Uranus Sun people. If you don't discern through a meditative spiritual path, the deeper calling for you to, in fact, be a progressive, innovative, avant-garde, or even radical activist for positive change. The question is whether or not you have settled deeply in peace within yourself and understanding your spirituality and your ability to connect empathically and emotionally with others, rather than intellectually and doctrinarily or condescending through a proselytical way of trying to be a part of some greater movement without being centered within yourself. We have talked about the Neptune aspect plenty here. So lastly, we're going to finish with the Pluto position, Sun opposite Pluto or Sun square Pluto. I've talked about that to a certain extent when I talked about Scorpio, the meaning of the adverse side of having a Scorpio sun sign. However, you can be any sun sign and have Pluto in an adverse square or opposition. And so the father issue is this father can be domineering, it can be very emotionally and or intellectually shrewd and articulate, but also angry and vindictive and manipulative. He can also be quite narcissistic and or emotionally or sexually abusive. On the other hand, it can also imply a father who it can be very smart or shrewd, but is not willing to work hard or evolve his resources or abilities and wants to take shortcuts to be successful. And that can ultimately lead to criminal behavior. Or so father may have engaged in criminal behavior and been caught, and a source of embarrassment as a result. Also, some with this aspect are fathers who have just simply abandoned the family, have had children and not wanted to take responsibility and have disappeared. So this is the father who just, he never knew, or who was around for a while and left. And for some, it can imply the father who died in your childhood and therefore was not around, and affects a child's sense of shame and or self-worth. So the healing here again is the spiritual centered practices, a deep need for a forgiveness practice, the need to transcend resentment and fear, the need to have a regular meditation practice that helps evolve, and this applies for most people as well, and anyone with the father wound needs to evolve trust and faith in the providence and love of the universe, that the conditioning or experience in your subconscious mind in terms of abandonment, abuse, neglect, and or other lacks of neglect or father wound dynamics all create a subconscious mind experience of fear and distrust in the love of the divine Mother, Father, God that is not the truth. I mean, the conditioning of your childhood with your father wound is not the truth about the potential for your identity development and the expression and fulfillment of your purpose and prosperity in the world. And so those with the father wound are here fundamentally to understand that they are here to forgive their father and themselves, because some of the dynamics of the negative dynamics of your father are a reflection of your own hard karma, your own way of having neglected or avoided the spiritual principles and attunement of faith with the love and providence of the universe. So when you forgive and embrace that spiritual law, and also get beyond victim mentality, and I have to say that I'm speaking from my own experience here. So, I walk my talk, and, we're here to teach what we're here to learn most. And I can tell you that when I sincerely embraced a depth of understanding that forgiving my father was, in essence, as well, forgiving myself and opening the doorway to be nurtured by the love and providence of the universe, I cannot tell you that just how much more light and joy and inner peace I began to experience and continue to experience, and as well finding and having the faith in expressing my higher purpose. Believe me, I never thought I would be an astrologer when I was a child or even into my 20s. But there's a magic that's connected with being, from the real sense, having been born again through the experience of truly healing and transforming through practices. And astrology in this context, and knowing your astrology chart and where your blocks are, is a tremendous tool to deepening the affirmation of taking responsibility for yourself, getting beyond the victim mentality, and understanding the real possibilities of being motivated to turn one's will and life over to the care and love of a higher power. So on that, I conclude. I welcome to hear from you. If you have questions, you can contact me through my website, www.altazarastrology.com, or email me altazarastrology@gmail.com. Blessings to you.